35 years ago, the town of Hellville, California ceased to exist. Not because of a natural disaster, not because of a war, not because of an environmental catastrophe. According to official records, Hellville, known to many as Hellville, was evacuated after a series of murders authorities were unable to stop. Every resident was ordered to leave, businesses closed, roads were barricaded, utilities were disconnected. Over the course of several weeks, an entire American town was abandoned. It has remained that way ever since. Today, Hellville still appears on state maps. Property lines still exist. The cemetery remains. Tax records continue to be filed in a handful of parcels, but officially, no one lives there. For more than 3 decades, the events that led to Hellville's evacuation have been reduced to little more than rumor. Depending on who you ask, the town was overrun by a serial killer, abandoned because of mass hysteria, or quietly sealed off by state authorities who failed to contain what was happening there. After spending the past 7 months reviewing police reports, newspaper archives, court records, property records, photographs, and interviewing people directly connected to the case, I wanted to understand how an ordinary murder investigation became something unprecedented. Because most investigations begin with a crime. Mine began with an empty town. I'm Petra Sterling, and this is Hellville. When people remember the Hellville murders, they usually begin with Darren Greaves. His mask became the defining image of the case. Investigators would eventually identify him as the primary suspect, and his disappearance has remained one of the great unanswered questions surrounding Hellville. But that's not where this story begins. To understand how the investigation reached Darren Greaves, I first had to go back to the very beginning, before the headlines, before the theories, before anyone had ever heard Darren's name. Former Hellville Sheriff's Deputy Thompson spent nearly 3 decades with the department. In the spring of 1989, he was assigned to what everyone believed was a routine homicide investigation. Instead, he found himself working one of the most notorious unsolved cases in California history. We met earlier this year in a small diner about 20 miles from what used to be Hellville. When people talk about the Hellville murders today, what's the biggest thing they get wrong?
They start at the end. Everybody does. They know Darren Greaves. They know the town was evacuated. They know Hellville's still sitting empty all these years later. So they work backwards and convince themselves it was obvious. It wasn't obvious. Truth is, if you asked me that first week who we were looking for, Darren Greaves wouldn't have even crossed my mind.
When you first responded to the case, did you have any reason to believe it would become what it became?
No. We were thinking about paperwork, getting home in time for dinner. Sounds strange now, doesn't it? But that's the truth. We'd investigated murders before. We just had investigated 8 of them.
Take me back to the first one.
It had rained overnight. Not much, just enough to leave everything damp. I remember hoping we'd get lucky and find a clean set of footprints. Funny the things you remember.
You still remember the weather.
I remember everything about that day. Some memories, they never really leave you.
The first victim was Teresa Pringle, a 46-year-old English teacher at Hellville High School. According to the original incident report, she was found shortly after 6 o'clock in the evening, pinned to the chalkboard in her classroom with a large kitchen knife. Her purse was untouched. Her car remained in the faculty parking lot. Investigators found no signs of robbery and no immediate indication that anyone else had been present inside the building after school let out. Like Deputy Thompson, detectives initially believed they were investigating an isolated homicide.
That's where every investigation starts. Who knew her? Who saw her last? Who had reason to hurt her? You start close. You don't walk into a classroom thinking you're looking at the beginning of something that's going to empty an entire town.
Was there anything about Teresa Pringle's murder that struck you as unusual?
The violence. I'm not going to describe it. There's no value in that. But whoever killed Teresa Pringle wasn't trying to hide what they'd done. If anything, It felt like they wanted us to find her.
The brutality of Teresa Pringle's murder dominated local headlines for several days, but despite the shocking nature of the crime, investigators continued treating it as an isolated homicide. The prevailing theory was that Mrs. Pringle had been targeted by someone she knew. Detectives interviewed family members, colleagues, students, former students, and neighbors. They examined her finances, her phone records, and every known relationship. They found no evidence of a hidden life, no obvious enemies, and no motive that explained the violence. I asked Deputy Thompson how long it took before investigators began to suspect they might be dealing with something larger.
About 3 weeks. That's all it took. 3 weeks.
What happened?
We got another call. Different part of town, different victim, same feeling. You know, people always ask if we recognize the pattern right away. No, we recognize the violence. The pattern came later.
The second victim was 19-year-old Eric Monroe, a stock clerk at Whitaker's Market. He was found shortly after closing behind the loading dock, where employees routinely took their smoke breaks. Like Teresa Pringle, there were no signs of robbery. His wallet remained in his back pocket. The cash inside was untouched. According to the original sheriff's report, detectives noted similarities between the two crime scenes, but stopped short of publicly linking the murders.
Nobody wanted to use the word serial killer. Hell, people forget how different things were back then. That wasn't the first place your mind went. You looked for coincidences before you looked for monsters.
Were the similarities obvious?
Some of them, not all. There were things we kept to ourselves, details only the serial killer would have known. You don't publish those. Not if you're hoping somebody slips up later.
Many of those details remain sealed today, but reviewing the original investigative files, it's clear that by the end of May, detectives had quietly formed a task force. They still weren't telling the public they believed the murders were connected, but behind closed doors, they had stopped treating them as separate investigations. Residents, however, were beginning to draw their own conclusions.
Fear moves faster than facts. Somebody would hear a rumor at breakfast, and by lunch it had become the truth. You'd hear somebody say, "My cousin knows one of the deputies, and they already know who did it." No, we didn't. Not even close.
Do you remember the first time someone mentioned the carnival?
I do. It wasn't another deputy. It wasn't even another cop. It was a waitress. She poured my coffee and said, "You ought to go talk to those carnival people." I asked her why. She shrugged and said, "Because they weren't here before it all started." That was it. That's all it took. It made sense, and these folks were, well, not from here.
The Wainwright family carnival had arrived in Hellville just days before Teresa Pringle's murder. Like dozens of traveling carnivals operating across the country in the late 1980s, it moved from town to town throughout the spring and summer, setting up on fairgrounds before moving on a week or two later. At the center of it all was Robert Hodder Wainwright, known to children throughout the region simply as Pinwheel, the clown at the center of the carnival and its marketing.
Looking back, I understand why people focused on him. He was different. He was an outsider. He wore makeup. He lived in a trailer. And when people are scared, they don't just want answers. They want somebody to blame.
The rumors surrounding the carnival continued to grow, but rumors aren't evidence. Deputy Thompson told me that despite mounting public pressure, investigators still had nothing directly connecting Robert Wainwright or anyone working for the carnival to either murder.
That's right. We interviewed carnival employees. We checked permits. We looked at payroll records. We spoke with folks who'd spent time on the Midway. We didn't have probable cause to arrest anybody. You don't bring someone in because they wear grease paint for a living.
So what changed?
The third murder. Everything changed after the third murder.
The third victim was 20-year-old Melissa Grant, a seasonal camp counselor at Camp Hollow Pines, a family campground and children's summer sleepaway camp bordering the Hellville Fairgrounds. Melissa had worked at the camp for 3 seasons and was well known to both campers and staff. She disappeared after finishing her evening shift. Her body was discovered the following morning in a wooded area separating the campground from the carnival midway. For investigators, it was the first time one of the victims had a direct connection to the fairgrounds.
That got our attention.
Why?
Because now we had a victim who'd spent part of her last evening near where the carnival was operating. It wasn't proof of anything, but it was the first lead we had that connected one of the victims to the place everybody in town was already talking about.
According to witness statements, several campers remembered seeing Melissa walking through the midway shortly before closing. One family recalled seeing her stop at a game booth. Another remembered her talking with someone near the carousel. Not surprisingly, those memories became more detailed as the investigation unfolded.
That's the tricky part about witness statements. People think memory works like a videotape. And this was before CCTV security footage was popular. Somebody hears a rumor on Tuesday, and by Thursday, they're remembering things they never would have mentioned on Monday. It doesn't mean they're lying. It means they're human.
Reviewing the original interview transcripts today, it's striking how witness accounts evolved over time. Early interviews describe Melissa speaking with a carnival worker. Later interviews identify a clown. Eventually, several witnesses specifically remembered seeing Pinwheel. Modern psychologists refer to this phenomenon as memory conformity, the tendency for recollections to shift after repeated discussion with others. Investigators in 1989 had far less research available on the subject, but they were aware of the problem.
We knew better than to build a case on gossip, but we also couldn't ignore it.
Did you believe Robert Wainwright was responsible?
No. I believed Robert Wainwright was somebody we needed to investigate. There's a difference.
Investigators interviewed Robert Wainwright voluntarily. According to contemporaneous notes, he denied knowing Melissa Grant personally and insisted that during operating hours, he interacted with hundreds of people every day.
He wasn't wrong. That's what made it difficult. If you asked 50 kids in Hellville if they'd met Pinwheel, 49 of them would have said yes. That was his job.
How did he strike you?
Honestly, tired. He'd already heard the rumors. He knew why we wanted to talk to him. He answered every question we asked. Never angry, never asked for a lawyer. At one point, he looked at me and he said, "Deputy, when folks get frightened, they always blame the freak. In this case, a clown." I've thought about that sentence a lot over the years.
That quotation appears almost verbatim in the original interview notes. When folks get frightened, they always blame the freak. Investigators released Robert Wainwright later that afternoon, but by then the rumors had spread well beyond the sheriff's department. Parents stopped taking their children to the carnival. Attendance plummeted. Businesses began closing early. People started locking their doors. For the first time in its history, Hellville was afraid of itself. And then a fourth body was found. The discovery of a fourth victim changed everything. Until then, investigators had been working quietly, hoping to identify a suspect before panic spread through the community. That hope disappeared almost overnight.
The phones never stopped ringing. Everybody had a tip. Everybody thought they'd seen something. People started buying guns, hardware stores sold out of deadbolts, parents stopped letting their kids play outside. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was panic.
Public pressure intensified. The sheriff's department established a dedicated task force. State investigators joined the case, and attention increasingly focused on the Wainwright family carnival. Detectives re-interviewed employees, searched trailers, examined vehicles, and executed multiple search warrants. This time, they believed they had enough evidence to arrest Robert Wainwright.
Looking back, I think everyone wanted it to be him. Not because anybody was cutting corners, but because if it was him, then we could stop it.
On June 18, 1989, Robert Hodder Wainwright, known professionally as Pinwheel, was arrested on suspicion of multiple homicides. Newspapers across California carried the story. For many residents of Hellville, it felt like the nightmare was finally over.
I remember people applauding when we brought him out. I've never forgotten that. People were crying, hugging each other. Somebody yelled, "You got him!" And for a little while, we all hoped they were right.
But that hope wouldn't last. 3 days after Robert Wainwright's arrest, while he remained in county custody awaiting formal charges, another call came in.
I'll never forget the look on the sheriff's face. Nobody said anything. Nobody had to. We all knew what it meant.
Another body had been discovered. Robert Wainwright could not have committed the murder. The investigation had reached a dead end.
That was the day I stopped looking at the carnival.
What made you change your mind?
It wasn't just that another murder happened. It was timing. The same morning we got called out to that scene, another report crossed my desk. Different file, different deputy, different kind of case.
What was it?
A missing persons report. Young woman, 17 years old. Donna Greaves, Darren's twin sister.
The daughter of Dr. Alistair Greaves.
That's right. Everybody knew the doctor. Respected man. Delivered half the babies in Hellville. If somebody got hurt, that's where you went. According to the report, Donna hadn't been seen in nearly 48 hours. At first, it didn't seem connected. Young adults disappear sometimes. They come back. It happens. Something about it bothered me.
What was it?
I found myself wondering if we'd been looking in the wrong direction all along, and my attention turned to Dr. Greaves. I wish I could tell you. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was coincidence. All I know is, for the first time, I found myself wondering if we'd been looking in the wrong direction all along, and my attention turned to Dr. Greaves.
Next time on Hellville, with Robert Wainwright behind bars and the murders continuing, investigators were forced to abandon the only theory they had. As the search widened, a missing persons case involving the Greaves family would lead Deputy Thompson to uncover documents that had never been intended for public view.